Black Op Radio presents 50 Reasons for 50 Years. Why the Warren Commission may be the greatest fraud perpetrated on the American public. Now your host, Len Osanek.
Early in the Warren Commission's life, they had to respond to persistent rumors coming out of Texas that Lee Oswald was an FBI informant and that he may have been an agent of the intelligence community. The Commission's lead counsel, J. Lee Rankin, had to deal with these issues in a series of meetings and executive sessions in January 1964. The fact that J. Edgar Hoover had proclaimed on November 24th that they had the assassin, if the commissioners were to pursue information discovered about Lee Oswald, it would lead to a confrontation between the Commission and the FBI. Author Gerald McKnight, in his book, Breach of Trust, has gone into great detail with these often overlooked executive sessions, which reveal just how the commissioners had to rationalize not digging any deeper into the facts.
The guys on the commission were kind of confused about what Oswald's motive was. I mean, they did have to learn something. All of these sessions were top secret sessions. I know in the January 27th transcript, Rankin brought up the fact that Oswald had spent some time at the U.S. Military Language School in Monterey. You didn't just send Marines, just pick them out of line and say, okay, we're sick of looking at you here in South Carolina or whatever, and throw them into a program like the Military Language School out in California. Those are crash courses. I mean, that's serious business. They recognized he had a talent. Oswald was a low-functioning agent of the American government. He was part of what was called the False Defector Program, which was a joint program run by the Office of Naval Intelligence and the CIA. When Oswald got to Russia and he met with Marina, she said, well, he had an accent that was not exactly Russian language, but it sounded like he may have been from Lithuania or Latvia. So his command of Russian was pretty damn good. The men he worked with in Russia at the radio factory, I think he spoke largely in English, but he knew Russian so he could listen to them. What is he going to get? Some low-level kind of intelligence? I don't know. Oswald was a government agent. There's no question about that. That's just 2.5 years in Russia. He comes back to this country. They pay his fare back for him and Marina and the child. I think from the very get-go, Rankin knew what his obligations were. His obligations were simply to close this thing down. There was some indication, it was believed, or it was brooded about, that Oswald may have been an FBI informant. He could have easily have been Hosty's man. You know, James Hosty, he was Dallas FBI. But that he wasn't on the books. That is, he wasn't being paid. Or if he was being paid without any kind of paper record. There was the district attorney, Wade, when he was there at the meeting at the 24th, was he and a few others from Dallas. Rankin was there, and I think Warren was there. The only thing we know about 22nd, certainly the 24th meeting, is what Rankin tells us. There is no written record of what took place on the 24th. Wade, he made the case that, he said, I was, probably the head FBI guy in Ecuador. He said, I hired sources, paid them money, but I never had their names on book. I didn't copy them down at all, but they were my assets. If Oswald was anything, it's like Jack Ruby, who was, in fact, a provisional criminal informant. Now, that isn't so surprising because Ruby was running strip joints and bars and things like that, so he is the kind of person that the FBI would have sidled up to and say, look, you want to be welcomed here in the city and you want to be part of good government. Now, in New Orleans, maybe we got a case here. He's running Fair Play for Cuba. He gets in trouble. Oswald was turning out Fair Play for Cuba stuff, I think, and Bringuer and a couple of others took exception to that, and the cops come in. And so he ends up in jail. And then he calls FBI office in New Orleans, right? And he says, I'm in jail down here. And so what happens? Another FBI agent from the New Orleans office shows up at the jail and sits down, and they have this long colloquy. It's a couple of hours. They go on and on. And one has to ask you, what is this? Something's going on there. There's some connection there. And that whole 27th is how are we going to handle Hoover and at the same time maintain something by way of our cosmetic independence. If you have never read Breach of Trust, there is a 4-page document in the appendix. It is an FBI damage control tickler file, and it reveals what came to be known as the Hoover Horrors. It reveals an assortment of improper acts, blackmail threats, and copious examples of FBI failures to conduct any semblance of a good faith investigation. The only reason we know about this document was that it was mistakenly released to a Washington, D.C. lawyer under a Freedom of Information request. On the 23rd, 10 o'clock in the morning, Hoover calls Johnson and says, look, we've been looking at the evidence, and over 500 items came up with Agent Drain. They had a military plane. They got it up there 6 o'clock in the morning on the 23rd, and the FBI forensic boys were poring all over this. It's a quick review of the evidence, forensic evidence. They don't have a case. Hoover told President Johnson that the case against Oswald was, quote, not very, very strong, unquote. On 11/24, after Oswald's assassination, Hoover, in a memo to President aide Walter Jenkins, asserted that Oswald was the sole killer, and the Bureau must convince the public that Oswald is the real assassin. What a difference a day makes. Did the FBI lab come up with solid physical evidence tying Oswald unquestionably to the shooting in one day? No, not at all. I'm confident that the FBI never came up with any evidence that met forensic standards determining that Oswald was JFK's killer. On the contrary, I have seen a lot of inside FBI documents that FBI agents admitted that Oswald never shot anyone. Now, what changes that is the 24th. Oswald is dead. There'll be no trial. The evidence is not going to be trotted out here in any significant, serious one. Oswald has no lawyers. Case closed. But here's Kennedy, elected by the people and then removed from office by assassination, by an internal coup. This is the beginning of the decline of the United States. And here we are now. I mean, the decline is perceptible now, and you can almost hear it.
So in January 1964, the Warren Commission had to decide whether to pursue the truth wherever it may lead, or to work out a report compromised by the political realities of the time. The fact is, the Commission did compromise, and by doing so, the fix was in.
Stay tuned for the next installment as we expose week after week 50 lies the Warren Commission would like you to believe.